Hey guys, we are Sean and Christy. This is Long Long Honeymoon, and this week we have a fantastic topic for you. Grand Teton National Park. Yes, if Yellowstone is the mother of all national parks, Grand Teton is the sexy girl next door. Grand Teton, translated from the French, means large teats or nipples. Not only are there huge tracts of land, those mountains are real and they are spectacular. But it's not really only the mountains. We go for the wildlife. We're talking about bison, elk, moose, black bear, grizzly bear, pronghorn,
badgers, wombats, wookalars.
Pretty much everybody going to Yellowstone National Park also visits Grand Teton National Park. So we wanted to produce a video that discusses updates and changes that have happened in the area so that you can make the most of your trip. One of the reasons we love this particular park is the town of Jackson Hole. We're not going to talk too much about Jackson in this video. However, it is a fantastic Wyoming town with many fine restaurants, just great cultural activities, and a lot of resources for the traveler. So if you're RV camping in the Grand Tetons, you can always pop over to Jackson, get whatever supplies you need, have a nice dinner, and buy some fancy cowboy boots if that is what you're into.
But this video is really going to focus on Grand Teton National Park and how much time you should spend there. We're going to sort of talk about the shortest amount of time we think you could get away with if you're really pressed for time, and then kind of go from there. So Grand Teton National Park is 310,000 acres, which is 485 square miles. From the north end of the park to the south end of the park, it's about 45 miles of distance. So it's not anything in comparison size-wise to Yellowstone, so it shouldn't be as overwhelming as that park. This park is much easier to drive, I think, because you have several road options to get around, and the speed limit isn't always 35 on those roads, so it's not quite as slow a process as it can be when you visit Yellowstone.
Something to know if you're planning a trip to Grand Teton National Park, there is a specific app that you can get on your phone now that is dedicated to Grand Teton.
Yes, so Grand Teton National Park has its own app, has lots of information on it. It does have audio tours on it, so you can learn about the areas that you're seeing along your scenic drive by listening to the app. There's information on lodging, dining, all that kind of stuff. But I would also suggest that you download the General National Park Service app that covers all the national parks within the entire system, and then go to Grand Teton within that app, because you'll get more detailed information in one versus the other. So you might learn more by visiting both rather than just choosing one. There are 4 scenic drives within the park. The website kind of breaks them down and gives you the details, but if you do the whole loop of all of those drives, it's roughly 42 miles of driving. Of course, that's 42 miles on slower roads and places where you're going to want to stop and look. So you're going to want to give yourself, I think, a full day to do that scenic loop. So if you're somebody that only has, let's say, 2 days to see Grand Teton National Park, and again, I'm saying 2 full days, then I would dedicate 1 solid day to doing those scenic drives, making that full loop throughout the entire park, and at least just getting your head wrapped around all the different areas of the park. And then you can sort of go into exploring on your second day.
You're going to take a lot of photographs in Grand Teton National Park, but you'll drive from scenic turnout to scenic turnout throughout the park. So, I mean, typically you'll drive from one point to the next, you'll get out, you'll take some photos. There are a lot of famous photo spots there in the park. One that we highly recommend is Schwabacher's Landing. Mm-hmm. This is the famous beaver pond location where there are these ponds of still water, and you'll see the mountains reflect in the pond. So if it's a clear day, you'll get a nice mountain reflection there in the ponds. Obviously, if it's a foggy or cloudy day, then your view of the Tetons might be obfuscated by the clouds.
If you're further north in the park, another popular spot to stop off at is Oxbow Bend. It's along the Snake River, and it's another place where the mountains kind of reflect in the water. So obviously, if you have a calmer day, you're going to have that reflection, versus if it's a windy day, you're not going to see it. 2 other places that I think are really important to see if you only have 2 days and to spend some time at. One would be the famous Mormon Row.
Well, you'll recognize a lot of the structures built on Mormon Road. They were built out of wood by the first settlers in the area.
The Moulton family.
Yeah, the most famous is called the Moulton Barn, the T.A. Moulton Barn. You've seen this barn 1,000 times as well. It's a great place to go take some photographs of the barn, which is clearly inspired by the Tetons behind it.
And sometimes you might get lucky and there might be a bison herd in the area that you can take some pictures of too. So you just never know. One other place that I think is important to spend some time at if you've only got 2 days is the Jenny Lake area. It's probably the easiest visitors area to access, I think, within the park as far as having a lot to do and see. There's a visitor center there. There is an area called the Discovery Trail, and it's actually paved, and it's right along the lake shore. It's 0.35 miles long, so it's not super long. It is fully paved. It's wheelchair accessible, so if you have anybody in your group that, is mobility challenged, or if you have any young kids that need to be in a stroller, it's a great place to walk along the lake shore and take in the scenery. There's also the Jenny Lake boat tours. Basically, it's a boat that will take you to the opposite side of the lake where you have the chance to get off the boat if you want, and you can do a hike up to the Hidden Falls there, which is about a half a mile up and then another half a mile back down, and then you can take a later boat to get back, or you can just stay on the boat and go across and back.
Probably the big show-stopping change for our travels in Grand Teton National Park this year has to do with reservations. Previously, we have always stayed at the Grovant campground, which is a very large campground. It's certainly one of the largest in the national park system. And in years past, there were no reservations required, and you could roll up pretty much any time of day and usually be guaranteed to get a site. But in the post-pandemic era, with so many people out RV traveling, those sites were getting booked up very early in the morning. I heard tales of lines of campers waiting to get into Grovant stretched out from the registration house all the way out to the highway.
Yeah, I think they were really overwhelmed with the number of people trying to get into the campground every morning. So this year, you have to have a reservation. I would definitely go onto the website. I believe it's through recreation.gov, and make your reservation before you arrive to ensure that you have a site. Not just for Grovant Campground, but for the other campgrounds within the Grand Teton National Park as well. I believe there are 7 campgrounds total, although one of those is tent only, and all of them now require reservations. So get on recreation.gov and do a little research to find out which campground is best for you. And actually, I would suggest going to the Grand Teton National Park website, because that really breaks down the details of each campground, including the length limit for RVs and what amenities they have, etc.
Now, we will point out that Bridger Teton National Forest is adjacent to Grand Teton National Park. So if you're willing to go a little bit farther out, and I'm talking about 10 or 15 miles out.
And they do have some campgrounds that are as far as an hour away from Grand Teton National Park. So if you got desperate,
right,
there are some other options out there.
There are also some free overnight parking type of options in that national forest land, which would basically be boondocking. The most famous is the Upper Teton View, which is really not that far from Grand Teton National Park.
No.
And you have a great view of the Tetons from that area. However, the road to get into that area is not the most RV friendly.
It's something you definitely want to scout out, I think, before you turn down that road, unless you're in an overlanding type of vehicle or like a raised four-wheel drive type of vehicle. If you're somebody like us towing a travel trailer, I think you would want to unhitch and sort of scout it out before you tow your travel trailer up there. But there are a lot of people that do it, and depending on the weather, you may not have any trouble. Now, if it's been raining a lot or if it happens to snow, then you may not have the luck of fitting in up there. One thing to know, though, that area has been filling because there are so many campers coming to the area. So even the, boondocking sites have been filling up on a regular basis to the point where it's kind of overwhelming them.
Another point we really want to make has to do with trash. I hate to bring this up, but we noticed last year in Grovant a lot of trash being left in fire pits and also in the bear food locker storage boxes, those food lockers that are bear safe. People were leaving trash inside those, and we've heard it's also true in the boondocking areas up in the Grand Teton National Forest, and it's becoming quite a problem.
Yeah.
So I know that there are a lot of people who just recently acquired RVs who may not really be up to speed on some of the protocol.
So if you're somewhere where they have trash bins and they happen to be full, this is an area of the country where you should not leave your trash bags next to a dumpster. That is a huge no-no. I think it's usually a huge no-no anywhere, but especially in a, national park or national forest setting, because those dumpsters are usually bear safe, bear proof, for a reason, because they want to keep bears from coming to the area. And so if you leave your trash in a place where a bear can get to it, it's bad news for everybody. So please don't do that. Please don't leave them in fire pits.
Our campgrounds are not landfills.
Yes, absolutely.
So put your trash in trash receptacles.
Okay. So if you happen to be fortunate enough to have more than 2 days to spend in Grand Teton National Park, let's say you're going to spend anywhere from 4 to 6 days there. That's when you can sort of dig in a little deeper and get a little more off the beaten path. I think Rockavella Preserve, which is off of Moose Wilson Road, is definitely worth a visit. There are some great hikes that leave from there. The Phelps Lake loop trail leaves from there. It's a great hike, and probably will see a bear if you do that hike. The odds are pretty good, so make sure you have your bear spray. And that's true for any hike within Grand Teton National Park. You are in bear country. They are very active there, and you want to make sure that you have protection.
Always use protection when you're visiting the Grand Tetons. I just want to briefly talk about where to see wildlife in Grand Teton National Park. If you're looking for bear, we have had very good luck seeing black bear along the Moose Wilson Road, which is a really very poor quality gravel road. You wouldn't want to drive a big rig RV along it. You wouldn't want to tow a trailer along it.
You can't be longer than 23 feet to drive Moose Wilson.
Yeah, I don't think they would let you.
Yeah, it's not allowed. So, and a good portion of that road is not paved.
But we've had good luck seeing black bear on that road. And for grizzly, you would want to go more to the north of the park.
Ask a ranger. If you want to see a particular animal, if you want to see elk, if you want to see moose, if you want to see a bear, talk to the rangers. They'll tell you where the most recent sightings have been, and they'll direct you in that area. Now, if a certain area becomes overrun with people searching for animals that have been out and about, like on Moose Wilson Road, sometimes they will have a bear in a certain spot for several days, and it will attract a huge crowd of people. They'll just close the road to people to give the bear room.
For bison, we have seen them back in the Grovant area, back around where the Mormon Row is. There's usually a herd of bison roaming around back there. And you'll also see pronghorn in that area. Of course, you see pronghorn really all throughout Wyoming, but it's kind of fun to see them with Tetons as a backdrop. You will also find elk in the park.
Yes.
I think if you take any of these scenic drives through the park, especially late in the afternoon, you're probably going to see elk out and about.
Yeah, and I think Grand Teton National Park is probably your best bet for seeing a moose in the lower 48 states. We usually always see multiple moose when we're visiting that area. Again, ask rangers where to see them, and they usually will point you in the area that they've been spotted recently.
If you're staying in the Grovant campground, there is a strong possibility, even probability, there will be moose walking through the campground in the morning and afternoon. Really could happen any time of day.
Maybe through your campsite.
Yeah, they may even be sleeping there at night. We've had that happen before too, because the Grovant campground is located adjacent to the Grovant River, and the moose love that river, so they'll be coming back and forth every day.
Really watch your speed when you're driving through Grand Teton National Park, especially the main highway that cuts through the park, because moose do cross that road. The speed limit, I believe, is 45 to 55, depending on what area you're in. But moose will cross that road, even at night. And so you have to be really careful of your speed and keep your eyes really open because they are big, dark creatures. And if you get into a fight with a moose, you're going to lose, even if you're in a car.
And I've seen them before crossing the highway, and they don't really look both ways. They just kind of spring out and spring across the road.
Yeah.
And some of these large bull moose could weigh 1,000 pounds.
Yes.
Or more. So
taller than our truck.
Yeah.
And you have to give them the respect that they deserve.
Yeah.
A few other places to go if you've got that 4 to 6 day leisurely visit. Jackson Lake Lodge, I think, is a really great place to visit. It's sort of historically important.
Yeah, there were some Cold War peace negotiations that happened there back in the 80s.
Yeah, it's actually a National Historic Landmark now.
We actually have seen grizzly bears there.
Yes, there are several hikes that leave from the Jackson Lake Lodge area. There's a beautiful view of the Teton Range out behind the lodge. There's some nice restaurants there if you want to grab a bite to eat. And you can also do lake cruises from that area. I think they have like a lunch cruise that you can do.
Another place to explore is the Signal Mountain area.
There's a drive to the top of the mountain, which has a view. There's also a hike that you can do, but I think it's a pretty strenuous hike. It's like a 7-mile hike that goes up to the top of Signal Mountain, but you can also just drive to the top and take in the view from there. There's also a restaurant there called the Trapper Grill that is famous for the Signal Mountain of nachos. It's apparently enough for like 4 people. I think you can get a half order if you want.
Yeah, people come from all over the area to get those nachos.
Yeah, apparently it's a big thing. And I guess they have a nice view at sunset there.
We always encourage people to take a hike if you're in Grand Teton National Park.
Yes, Taggart Lake hike is probably one of the most scenic hikes we do just because you literally are walking up right underneath the Grand Teton. So it's a great view. We've got probably a lot of pictures that we've posted from there over the years, but it's not too strenuous. I mean, there is some uphill portions, but they're not too crazy. It's probably, I don't know, a 2-hour hike.
Yeah, it's pretty easy.
Another area that you can explore is the Coulter Bay area. They actually have a really large campground there, and they also have an RV park there. So if you need full hookups and you want to be within the park, the Coulter Bay RV Park is your option, or your best option, I should say. Again, you have to make reservations for all these things now. Coulter Bay also has a marina. You can rent boats there. You can rent kayaks there. You can rent canoes there. So a lot of activity type oriented things happen from Coulter Bay. So if you are somebody that has the time to do those things, that's a great spot to go and do them from. Another thing that you can do activity-wise within Grand Teton is horseback riding. I think that would be a lot of fun. We've never done it, but maybe we'll do it this year. There are several outfitters that do horseback riding through the park, and I just think that would be the ultimate like cowboy experience adventure to do in such an incredibly scenic location.
Another fun activity, which we have done, is to take a float trip or rafting trip on the Snake River. We did kind of a scenic float trip one year, and it's just a very pleasant day on the water in front of the Tetons. Very pleasant. And I've also done the rafting on the Snake River, which is a lot of fun. Yeah. So there are many tourist companies in the town of Jackson. So like if you're looking to book sort of private tours, or some of those activities, you can just look in Jackson and you'll find.
But also if you check the Grand Teton National Park website, they will give you a list of concessioners that are permitted to operate within the national park. So you'll find those horseback riding, companies, the float trip companies. You can also do fishing trips through the park on the Snake River. So if you're a fisherman, that's an option for you. You can also do kayaking, stand-up paddleboarding, swimming, which is kind of unusual in a national park. String Lake is probably the most popular spot where people go to swim. I will say the water is going to be freezing, so be prepared for that. We have taken our boat out on String Lake a few times and over to Lee Lake. One thing to know, if you were going to bring your own kayak or canoe or stand-up paddleboard, you have to get it inspected for invasive aquatic species, which sounds like something really crazy, but I guess it's a thing. You can get it inspected right there when you come into the park at the Discovery Center, Visitor Center. You also have to have a boat permit from the state of Wyoming. So just know that before you go. You can't just show up and toss it in the water. Got to get those permits.
If you carry a bike with you when you travel, there's some great bike trails in that area, including one relatively new construction bike trail that stretches from the town of Jackson all the way out to the park.
Yeah. And then once you're in the park, there are some bike paths there as well. So a lot of great options if you are a cyclist or if you are just a casual biker. Grand Teton has a specific map for areas that you can take your pet. So I think that's pretty interesting. They do have pet regulations. You cannot take your pet on hiking trails or that sort of thing, but there are certain areas in the park along main roads, some picnic areas where you can take your pet. You just need to check their website for the specifics. And they also give suggestions within the national forest where you can take your pet out on the trails.
Baby girl would tear up a grizzly bear, I'm telling you. The Chihuahua is the piranha of Mexico.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys, there was a look at Grand Teton National Park. Every year we like to do a video where we circle back, revisit the Tetons, and inform you with regard to what has changed. We'll be shooting more in the Tetons this summer. Look for us, because if we're not residing in LOLOHO National Forest, you usually find us in the Tetons.
One thing I will say about Grand Teton National Park, it's not nearly as large as Yellowstone, but I feel like even though we've been dozens of times, there's still things that we haven't seen or done. There's still hikes that we haven't done. So there's really just so much to see and do there. You could spend a month and not do it all. But I do think if you have a minimum of 2 days, you can see kind of the highlights. And then if you have 4 to 6 days, you can knock out a lot of the big must-see visit spots.
I think that's what makes that area so special. You know, there's so much to do and see that you can go every year and discover something different. What about you guys? Have you been to Grand Teton National Park? Will you go this year? If so, look for Sean and Christy. We may have a LOLOHO Nation meetup once again in that area.
Yeah, and if you have been, what amount of time do you think people really need to visit it? Leave it down in the comments below and let us know.
Thank you, as always, for tuning in. If you're new to our channel, please subscribe.
If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up. If you disliked it, give it a thumbs down. And leave a nice comment down below. If you got something mean to say, just, move along. We don't need that kind of negativity here.
I'm sure we'll get it.
Anyhow, like Sean said, if you enjoyed it, if you haven't, like and subscribe. We appreciate it so much. And until next time, what do we say?
LOLOHO. Well, you go for those teats. So, Large Nipple National Park in Wyoming. Check it out. The Hustler 571 banana slicer in action.